Hey, what's going on, guys? Usually I do funny reacts videos to mostly Chinese military. Nothing like making fun of the Chinese. Today is different because I want to do a reacts, but I'm also going to talk about this Charlie Kirk situation where yesterday at 12:20, 30 minutes down the road, Charlie Kirk was killed in front of 3,000 people and millions more because all the cell phone video, all the spectator video was widely disseminated across the internet very fast. That's what makes this different. This wasn't just a shooting in the back streets of, name the inner city. This wasn't just an assassination that you read about on the news. This was very real because it was televised, sent over every social media platform, everywhere. I've studied the video, and I've also seen the enormous amount of traffic coming out of most of the social media platforms and seen the discontent. If I was a foreign adversary, well, you better believe I would be pumping resources into amplifying the noise. So here's what we know. At 12:20, during a speaking engagement on the college campus of the University of Utah, Charlie Kirk had just answered his first question, and it happened to be on mass shootings, when he ended with the word violence, and he put down the microphone, or he put it below him, holding it in his hand from his mouth, sat back and settled in underneath his typical pop-up tent. I mean, if you've seen his YouTube channel, that's typically how he does it. He goes to an outdoor venue and says, "Prove me wrong." And he has mostly polite conversations, respectful conversations. He has been recorded saying the reason he does that is because when we stop talking to each other, when we stop identifying each other as fellow human beings, well, that's when violence happens. And that's ironic, because as soon as he settled in, he was hit with what I believe was a 30 cal at a minimum round. Now, there's a lot of speculation here. Let me go over the technical details. And I did a react that was live when we heard about what had happened. At least it had not been widely disseminated that he was passed. And I said, based on what I saw, the chances of him surviving were slim to none. And that's for several reasons. If you haven't watched the video, I would encourage you not to watch the video because it is traumatic. It is a man losing his life in front of his family, by the way. His wife and family, his children were there present. And I believe that when he was hit, he was gone. I speculated about this in the reacts, and I said, look, there are two ways that physiologically your body's going to respond to significant trauma from a round. One, you're not hitting anything vital and you continue to fight. Now, you could potentially bleed, but you have the ability, for example, to move your hands, to move your body. He had no ability to do any of that. Because what I believe happened is, there's speculation that he was wearing body armor. He wasn't wearing body armor. Unless he was wearing a very low-vis, close-to-skin, thin, soft vest. It is not apparent in any video that I've seen with his T-shirt that he's wearing any armor at all. He's surrounded by his protection detail, by bodyguards who have been with him, by the way, for many years. There is a video which I've looked at in detail, and I can't show it here because it'll be immediately suppressed, but I will likely do it on my Patreon, so you guys can follow my patreon.com/Mike Glover down below, where his shirt moves and it goes up, and there's speculation that he's hit in the chest, the bullet bounces off, and then ricochets and hits him in the neck. That's not how it works, guys. Number one, a bullet doesn't technically ricochet off of a plate or a soft vest. If it's a high-powered rifle, which it was, the FBI reported this morning they found the high-powered bolt-action rifle, that's what they described it as, in the woods near the college, near where the suspect fled. We'll get into that as well. So if a round hits a plate, a ceramic ballistic plate that's meant to stop rifle rounds, the bullet will basically dissipate all its energy and it will shroon out and stop on the plate and typically fall down. I mean, I know this because I've never been hit in the chest plates, but I've had teammates hit in the chest plates even with 7.62 by 54, which is PKM ammo from a machine gun. One of my buddies, Mark, was shot point-blank range with a AK round, went through his gun. We suspect, obviously, it's an AP round, an armor-piercing round, because it went through his rifle, went through a magazine on his carrier, and then hit the plate. Now, obviously, the obstacles in between it slowed it down, but when a round hits the plate, it flattens, and usually goes down. And you could typically find the rounds captured in the clothing. It is not likely, it is actually impossible for a round to hit, ricochet, and go up to create that opening wound. What you saw is the turbulence that's created from a round in the air when it impacts anything. In this case, Charlie Kirk's neck. Now, what you don't really see is, because you get the impression from looking squared up on Charlie, that somehow the round just hits him in the neck directly head on. So it's like here, and it potentially is going to go through and through. And it's like a grazing wound, but it hits his carotid, which it for sure did. That's not the case, guys. Based on the trajectory lined out from where the proposed shooter was videotaped, shot, and angled down towards the tent, he was hit from the left side. So that round went in the left side, direct shot, created the turbulence, which moved his shirt. And that's how it works, guys. I mean, this round is traveling at a minimum of 2,700 feet per second. And a 30 cal round going from 2,700 feet per second to instantaneously stopping is going to create that turbulence, which is the air that you see moving his shirt. And that round entered his neck, compromised his carotid, and then entered his upper cervical, his neck, his spine, which is why he clenched up and he was gone. Now, there is a chance that he was still alive. If they stopped the bleed, which I saw the videos also when he went on the ground, there were members of his protection detail that are likely trained in stop the bleed that tried to grab and stop the bleed, but when they transported him and they started moving him, he was still bleeding. Now, they pushed him into the car that they had already pre-staged. I mean, this happened. I mean, I know you don't give kudos to a protection detail that's private, that's working for a private citizen, but they did a really good job. Despite the already tragic circumstances of likely him being deceased, they did a really good job. There wasn't a lot of chaos. They immediately got on top of him. They immediately rendered aid, and they immediately moved him to the vehicle in a matter of seconds. As they moved him to the vehicle, they put him in, and they transported him, likely to the local hospital in the area. He was already gone. That round, 30 cal, which I'm saying it's 30 cal because of the size of the entry wound. Now, there's speculation that it was an exit wound. It's not an exit wound. That is not an exit wound. That is an entry wound. That entry wound hole is massive. enough to sever the carotid artery, which I have to remind you, if you don't know, it's a highway for blood to the brain and body. When compromised completely, the chances of survival are almost nil, almost nothing. The reason being is you could stop the initial bleed, but that compromised amount of blood that poured out of him is now no longer providing blood to the brain and to the body. And to fix that requires surgical intervention. No amount of pressure is going to stop that bleed. It requires surgical intervention. So meaning you put your hands on it, it's still bleeding internally, and he's bleeding. It's like the aortic arch. He's bleeding profusely inside, and there's no way to manage that. Now, if it was nicked, slightly compromised, there's obviously a chance. But in this case, based on the position and posture of his physical body, where you see his head go back and his hands clench up, he has no ability to move his body because the connection of wiring in his brain through his nervous system into his physical body is no longer there. And that is a sign that he was likely at least brain dead and killed, even though his body was still fighting for life, because he still had blood likely in his system and his heart might have still been beating. But by the time they transported him, it is in my opinion that he likely died in the vehicle, or he died on the way to getting into the hospital. But they didn't get him in and stabilize him, and then he passed away. Again, he likely sealed his fate when he was hit and struck by the assassin's bullet right out the gate. And I wanted to be optimistic about any part of this, but I also want to tell you the truth. When you hear the round, there's a distinct now, it can be deceiving depending on where you're at and what type of microphone is receiving that report. It does sound, in my opinion, to be suppressed. Now, there's a lot of confusion online, and I'm just going to clarify this. Guys, suppressors do not silence guns. It is a urban myth by design meant to create fear that somehow this tactic is being utilized by bad guys, by criminals, by assassins, and that's why it needs to be banned, which is the most ridiculous argument out of all. I mean, all of it's ridiculous, but one of the most ridiculous arguments for why we should ban a piece of material that goes on the end of a weapon system that reduces the overall decibel range, that makes it more convenient for the shooter to not be deaf, more convenient for a good guy protecting his family from a bad guy, and be able to not have ear protection or be deaf. Those are the options. And it reduces overall gas expending everywhere, and there's muzzle flash considerations as well, which aren't great because you're still going to get a flash report through most cans. A supersonic round through any can will have that type of sound. Now, based on the fact that it was 200 yards away and you hear that, it's about 50-50 for me whether or not it was suppressed or not. Because if the shooter was on the rooftop, which there's video of him belly flat, and he takes a 200-yard shot and you're down range and you're going to hear that decibel range, what we heard on the microphone. So it could have been suppressed, could have not been suppressed. For sure, though, in my opinion, a 30 cal at a minimum. It could have been a hunting rifle, could have been a 30-06, still 30 cal, but it's likely 308, which is 7.62 millimeters by 51 millimeters. 308 is just the U.S. version of the measurement, measured in inches, 0.308 inches, which is about this big. And a lot of people have said, well, this guy's a sniper. Let's get into that. So there's a couple considerations here for what qualifies as this guy being a professional, being trained. And for me, it has nothing to do with people's general ability to shoot a high-powered rifle with an optic and hit their intended target. For one, I don't believe the neck was the intended target. I believe the shooter was going for the head, and he landed the round low. You could speculate that he wasn't accounting for his hold. My speculation is that he flinched and likely dumped the round lower than he intended to, or he had a awkward position and didn't have the shot that he wanted, so he just took it as quickly as possible, snatched the round, and it indexed low. Why would I say that? Well, for sure, the shooter wasn't going for the highest statistical probability, meaning he wasn't going for the chest. He wanted to send one round and take Charlie Kirk's life. If you believe he had body armor, soft armor, then you would go for the head. You would not deliberately go for the neck. The head, which is in front of obviously everything that's the central nervous system, is mostly brain, followed by your nose. Let's start at the bridge, down. But any round in any impact at any angle would likely penetrate the face or the head and then take out the brain stem and then shut the person down. It would be instant death. So I believe he went for the head, he pulled his shot, and dropped it into the neck. Now, what we do know is technically this shooter likely had the skill set to understand how to plan an operation, how to recon or scout an operation, and how to execute it, which includes infill, actions on, and exfil. And I'll break that down for you, which makes me lean towards more that they're either a veteran, former MIL, GWAT vet, and have some type of experience with training. Because training would not be enough. Training would not be enough to complete this entire operation. What you do see when you have training without the experience, you get guys in Butler, Pennsylvania, where he's going for broke. He's going into a circumstance where he's setting himself up. He's taking the shot, but he knows in desperation he's likely going to die. This guy's intent was not to commit suicide, was not to be taken out by the cops. He infiltrated undetected, apparently by the description of dispatch, a helmet, black uniform, ski mask, and jeans with a rifle. That rifle was likely bagged out. He did not leave a shell casing behind. Is it the rifle that doesn't leave shell casings behind? It's not. There was a bolt action gun found by the FBI that was deemed a high-powered rifle, and they designated the type of cycle of operation as bolt, meaning to chamber a round, you push the bolt forward, you unlatch, push the bolt forward, which chambers the round, which is the round itself. The primer and the cartridge is sitting on the front of the bolt face, locked into position via a lug. You lock it into the barrel, the back of the barrel, which is known as the breech, and then you lock the gun down. You lock the bolt gun down. This creates a locked chamber that creates consistent chamber pressures, allowing the round to exit accurately or consistently. When he unlatches the bolt and pulls it to the rear, it's going to eject and extract the spent casing. The bullet or projectile is my belief, it would be 7.62 by 51 or 308, would be gone, because of the propellant, the gunpowder being launching the round or projectile out of the barrel, because the primer was striked. Just reverse engineering it for you. When he pulls back on that bolt, it extracts, ejects, and then he has to physically capture the round with his hand or look down, pick up that round, and move out. You can get away with taking a shot knowing you potentially would be taken out because you haven't studied or had a plan for the entire operation. But if you have an experience, then you're going to get through the entire operation and do all of the parameters of it successfully. You're going to scout the location. You're going to infiltrate a vehicle on foot. You're going to set up your position. You're going to take the shot and actions on, and then you're going to exfil. And that's what leads me more likely to believe that he has training and experience, meaning a profile that fits not a professional, not an actual sniper, but somebody who has some form of experience in operations planning, in understanding warfare, military or police operations, etc. He could be a civilian who just studied it and trained with it. It is very easy with variable magnification and a zeroed rifle, any rifle nowadays, to take that shot. The difference is it is more difficult to do something like that under pressure of being compromised, killed, captured, whatever it might be. Everybody says, well, that's an easy shot. Well, it is an easy shot. But I've trained plenty of people who are taking easy shots all day long, and then we add a little bit of stress, a little physical duress, elevating the heart rate, cortisol, adrenaline, scoreable targets, peer pressure, whatever it is, competition, then they fall apart. So to be able to take that shot under pressure makes me believe that he has some form of experience and training. To give you an understanding a little bit about the capability of a .308 round, from my personal experience, I went to sniper school at least for 3/4 of the course with a .308, a Remington SWS sniper weapon system, which was essentially a long-action Remington 700, a bolt-action M24 rifle, a hunting rifle. Now, it had a free-floating barrel, it had a fiberglass stock. It was allegedly accurized. Depending on the gun you pulled, the round count you had, the barrel life, etc., you would find a gun that was 2 minutes, meaning shooting a 2-inch group, sustaining a 2-inch group at 100 yards with .308, to a 1-minute gun, capable of holding a stack of .308 rounds inside of a 1-inch by 1-inch pasty at 100 yards. So let's just say it's a 1-minute gun. If it's a 1-minute gun, which most civilian rifles advertise to be that. I have a SIG 6.5 Creedmoor. It's called a SIG Cross. That rifle out of the box is a sub-minute gun. I could stack rounds on top of each other with a good optic, flat on my belly, in a good stable position all day long. All day long. 10, 20 years ago, when I was growing up as a sniper, it was hard to find a rifle like that. It was expensive if you wanted to have a rifle like that. Some of the best rifles I ever saw were variants like the M40A1 that the Marine Corps snipers used, built by Charlie from JSOC, one of the old JSOC armors. That rifle was likely a civilian variant and had variable magnification. When I went to sniper school with an M24, generally speaking, anything under 500 meters, because we did everything in meters, was an easy all-day shot. Even back then with a 10-power scope. We used a Leupold 10-power M3 Alpha scope that was minutes of angle in the BDC, in the units of measure. The bullet drop compensator on top, moving your elevation. We've since gone to, in my career field, over the course of 10 years, evolving the sniper game, we've since gone to mil radian for the bullet drop compensation, so mils, and typically at a minimum 21 power for variable magnification, meaning you could dial it out to all the way out, which is typically 3 at a minimum, all the way in to 21 power. At 200 yards with a 21 power scope, you would be able to basically focus in on Charlie Kirk's face at that distance. So at a round leaving the barrel, now again, this is .308 Winchester. It's Aquila 150 grain full metal jacket. There are a lot better rounds. But at 200 yards, the velocity is 2,200 feet per second, screaming. It exited the barrel at 2,700 feet per second. The deviation from a 100-yard zero, where obviously it's point of aim, point of impact, at 200 yards, if he didn't change his elevation with his reticle, he didn't dial the dope with his bullet drop compensator, the deviation would be 4 inches. I wouldn't call that nominal. I wouldn't call that a minor deviation. That is a hold. So if the shooter was holding down his reticle on Charlie Kirk's head and he sent a round without deviating his bullet drop compensation or holding for the round with a reticle, like a Christmas tree reticle, which I hate the term, but H59, H37, Tremor 2, Tremor 3 reticle that has all the holds in the bottom half of the reticle, including wind holds for deviation left and right, he would be about 4.2 inches low, generally speaking. Meaning if he was aiming here, he potentially could have dropped the round into his neck. So I think he was going for the head. He didn't compensate for his hold, which again speaks to me that he's not a professional sniper, which has been put out a lot, but he does likely have training. He does likely have some form of experience. And again, that experience doesn't have to be mil LEO. It could be he went to a training course and he gained experience through that training course. He went to a small unit tactics course. He's learned somewhere how to infiltrate, he's learned somewhere how to conduct an operation under stress in some form. The FBI has reported that this guy was seen coming into the area, walking into the building with a rifle, walking up the stairwell. Now video confirms from a bystander that he was on the rooftop, belly flat, and then after the shot, they see him moving across, exfilled down the stairwell. This is all reported by the FBI, and that he moved off site on foot into a neighborhood. They've cased the neighborhood. They've talked to everybody with a camera, and allegedly they said it this morning, they have a video of him, and they're trying to get it technically analyzed so they could do more visual recognition. They found the rifle in the wood line with a palm print, multiple fingerprints tossed in the woods. That, to me, in several ways, points to the fact that he likely wasn't a professional, meaning he wasn't a sniper. but we'll find out. The biggest mistake I think the FBI is making right now is they were asked, why haven't they released it to the public? And they said, well, we want to technically analyze it, and if we can't get it assessed, if we can't get a clearer picture, then we will release the image to the public. Why would you not release that image now to the public? Because every second, every minute that goes by, he potentially is getting further away. And for some reason, post this event, when they said they had 2 alleged suspects that were person of interest, and then they later released them, there were no news reports on the shooter still on the loose. In fact, the opposite, the chief of police for UVU, actually I think it was the state lead who's leading the investigation for Utah State Patrol, said, we're not concerned because it looks like he came in, he was a lone shooter, and he took out one guy. You should be concerned. There's an assassin who murdered the most impressionable, conservative, not right-wing extremist, conservative voice of reason and logic, the Mother Teresa of the conservative movement, assassinated him, and you're not concerned for the safety of the public? Maybe you should be concerned. Because if that person's desperate, what else are they going to do? On 9/11, what else are they capable of? Also, the University of Utah Police Department was notified of this event in advance, obviously. The chief of police acknowledged the failing of their department to provide the appropriate resources given the circumstances. I appreciate his perspective, his honesty, and his willingness to eat this, because you're right, it is your fault. And it is your officers' faults. That you have 6 officers dedicated with no other resources, by the way. The public has pointed out on social media there was no EMTs, no ambulances staged. You have a county fair with 100 people, and you'll have an ambulance on site, a fire engine on site. There was none of that. There were 3,000 plus people on site, and they had 6 officers. Most of them near co-located with Kirk's element, where they thought the potential risk would happen, but nobody covering the high ground. This will change American history forever. I told the audience last night on Survival Dispatch, as this pendulum swings, that it's going to swing back in the opposite direction. And it's going to move faster, harder, and more violent. And that's a fear of mine. We should retain the peace and be who, if you're a libertarian or conservative, who you are. Not a fringe maniac, a radical inciting violence on innocent people, but a voice of reason, which was what Charlie Kirk was, which is why I think the pendulum will swing. Who's going to step up and replace Charlie Kirk? Like Khalid Muhammad said yesterday on Survival Dispatch, calling me out because I said somebody's got to step up. And the answer, he was right. Nobody's going to step up because nobody can replace Charlie Kirk. Where do you go from here if you're a young person who valued what Turning Point was doing in the country? If you're one of the 3,000 people who were there to support Turning Point and Charlie Kirk and saw him get assassinated in front of his beautiful family's eyes, his poor children, growing up without a father. At the same time, the lunatics from the far left are going after Charlie Kirk and his family, calling him a voice of hate speech, of radicalization. He's never been that. I saw a X tweet yesterday where they try to say, well, here's examples where he wasn't a voice of reason and empathy and respect. And he was literally calling out people who were violently going after him and his family. And he was defending them with words, by the way. So let me get this right. You're so offended by his speech that we're entitled to, via the Constitution, that you assassinate him, that you kill him. Why? Because he's so effective. That's why. The pendulum will swing. I'll keep you guys updated on this and more. I'm going to do a podcast likely tomorrow if we get any updates on the shooter. I just wanted to lay out a technical reacts for you. Prayers for the Kirk family, his friends, and all those that witnessed him losing his life for his cause. It's a sad day in American history as I say this out loud on the anniversary of 9/11. Sad set of circumstances, guys. I hope we find that shooter, and I hope the FBI wakes up and reports and shows who this shooter is. You give the public 5 minutes, and we'll figure it out. Till next time. Thanks, guys.